Dragon's Wish by M.R. Anglin, Chapter 2. After taking a moment to inhale a steadying breath, Sevrin shoved his way through the crowd. "Pardon me," he said. "Just want to take a peek. Won't be long." He shouldered and wedged his way through the crowd. "Watch it, you!" A chimney sweep covered in soot and holding a long brush shoved Sevrin aside. Sevrin stumbled and collided with a large wall of a man. "Move on!" The man thrust Sevrin aside. Sevrin staggered a bit, but kept his feet. He was now in the midst of the crowd, a writhing, trembling mass he couldn't see over. Standing on his tiptoes only got him a glimpse of the main road cutting through the city. No, he had to get closer. Using his shoulder, he shoved through the densely packed crowd. "Quit shoving!" A woman pushed him hard. "One moment." Sevrin wormed his way forward. But there wasn't much room to maneuver. Men and women, young and old alike, pushed back against his progress. The harder he shoved, the harder they thrust back. Soon the entire crowd was pushed and shoving against him. After getting himself jostled around for a bit, he found a way to use the general momentum to push him closer to the street. There, he almost made it. Almost. Phew! Sevrin thrust his way to the front of the line. Made it! Ducking low to keep out of the sightline of the crowd he had cut in front of, he glanced around for the princess. Indeed, quite a procession were traveling down the road. Apart from the herald calling, "Way! Way!" a line of horses and knights trotted their way down. Someone in the churning crowd slammed into Sevrin from behind. The jolt knocked him off his feet, and he skidded onto the stone street, elbow slamming into the ground. The rough stone scraped the skin off. "Ow!" With a groan, Sevrin got to his hands and knees. "Guess I deserved that for causing such a fuss." "What on earth?" A horse's screech cut off a young lady's voice. Sevrin jerked his head around and came face to face with horse hoofs flying towards his head. The horse's rider, dressed in a mass of frills, yanked at the reins, wrenching the house out of Severin's path. The brown and white mare slammed into a white stallion, the rider of which was dressed in shining silver armor. The jolt knocked the knight off his mount, and he tumbled in a heap of clattering metal. Sevrin winced. This encounter would not end well. The lady, however, kept her seat. She patted the horse's side, calming it with soothing words. "Princess Desimone, are you all right?" The princess's lady-in-waiting, a young woman with hair as black as raven's feathers, rode to the princess's side. "Yes, Maria, I'm all right." The princess stroked her horse's flanks. "As is Chestnut?" "I'm not so certain about Sir Galloway, though." Another knight in her party rode to the princess's other side. "More than his body, his pride must be wounded after being unhorsed by a peasant." "Oh, Sir Aaron, you're terrible!" Desimone covered her smile with a gloved hand. A melodious laugh trickled through the air. Sevrin had no idea when the clouds had covered over the sky, but they parted when Desimone laughed. The squirming, shoving crowd faded away into the background, silenced by her beauty and grace. Though her hair had been mostly hidden by a veil, Sevrin still spied her light brown hair cascading onto her shoulders when the wind or her motion blew through it. Her pale pink cheeks sported honey-colored dots of perfection. Freckles, ordinary people called them. As he gazed at her, Sevrin heard his heart thump like armored brutes clopping over the stone. There was nothing but her in his eyes right now. The world snapped back into focus when the tip of a sword touched his neck. The knight who had been unhorsed stood in front of him, his blue eyes flashing. He was not wearing his helmet, so Sevrin could see his wavy blonde hair, his square chin, and his mouth set in a snarl. "How dare you jump in front of my lady, knave!" The knight pushed his sword ever so slightly into Severin's skin. Sevrin froze as the blade flashed in the sun. "You have impugned her honor, and mine." Sevrin gulped, remaining still so as not to have the sword pierce his throat. "Please put it down, Sir Galloway." Princess Desimone's speech came like the voices of angels. "I would like to spare you violence on my behalf." "Your Highness," the knight turned to her without moving the sword. "He could have killed you when he jumped into your path as he did." "And Chestnut could have killed him." She patted her horse. "It was an accident, Sir Galloway. Please." With a grunt, Galloway sheathed his sword, but not without shooting a glare at Sevrin. The Princess Desimone dismounted her horse and handed the reins to one of her servants. "Are you all right?" She bent over to Sevrin and held her hand out to him. Severin's mouth went dry. All knowledge of how to speak, how to make words, fled him. Not that he wanted to speak. At the moment, all he wanted to do was stare into Princess Desimone's beautifully sparkling olive green eyes. After a few moments, the princess's chuckles sailed through the air. She set her hands on her knees and smiled. I don't think you're physically harmed. Whatever else may be wrong with you, I can't say. The knight, her handmaiden, as well as the crowd erupted into laughter. Severin's stomach dropped. He was suddenly aware a steady stream of had been proceeding out of his mouth. Embarrassment set his cheeks aflame. Forgive me, your highness. He scrambled to climb to his feet, pulling his coif off his head. I didn't mean to jump in front of your horse. Wringing his coif in his hands, he dared to peek at her face. She was staring at him, eyes roving over his face, and her lips pressed together. She was in a state of such concentration that everyone around them quieted. Not even Sevrin dared to make a move. After a few moments, Sir Galloway approached her, his jangling metal piercing the silence. Come, princess. He took her elbow. Let us leave this wretched place, and return you to the castle where you belong. Sir Galloway is right, my lady, Sir Aaron said. It's time we returned. But the princess didn't answer. Instead, she took a step back to examine Sevrin from head to toe. My lady? Maria touched the princess's shoulder. This is bewildering. The princess tapped her lips. After a few more moments of concentrated silence, she tilted her head at Sevrin. I think... Have we met? Severin's eyes widened a bit. Balderdash! Sir Galloway's voice echoed off the city streets, interrupting his thoughts. Princess Desimone, where would you have met a peasant? Why, at the annual procession, of course. Desimone broke eye contact with Sevrin to look at Galloway. You can't remember every peasant to bring you gifts on procession day, Maria pointed out. Everyone in the city appears for it. True. Desimone lowered her eyes to the ground. Though there are some I will never forget. With a sigh, she mounted her horse. I do hope you are well, my good man, she said to Sevrin. She gave him a smile, then, clicking her tongue, she set her horse back down the road to the castle. Maria also mounted her horse and followed the princess without sparing a glance at Sevrin as she rode by, but Sir Galloway shot a glare at him as he passed. After him came all the servants and guards chosen to ride with the princess. The crowd dispersed as the procession passed, leaving Sevrin on the ground. Soon the noise of the marketplace resumed, and once again he was in the way. Move on, said a woman with a bucket in her hands. She tried to sidestep him, but bumped into his back. I am such a fool. Sevrin pulled his coif over his head. His cheeks surged red with humiliation at the thought of what he had done, and said, Hey, Sevrin, come here! Daisy beckoned to him fiercely. Was it really the princess? Some fool went and nearly tripped a horse, they say. Sevrin pretended not to hear her calls as he sped toward the apothecary's shop. He didn't feel like reliving his mortification, or having the identity of the idiot fool who fell in front of the princess broadcast all over the marketplace, which would be exactly what happened if he told Daisy about it. That's the end of chapter 2.